The arm that was wrapped around my back holding me up felt like steel. He was so much bigger than I remembered. Harder. I jerked away from him, stumbling back, as crippling fear shot through me. I didn't wait for him to pull that sword that was there on his hip. I just turned and ran the other way. Cain paused when he saw me running towards him with a petrified look on my face. He reached out and grabbed me. "No, Cain, he's going to kill me," I yelled, trying to break free from him. "Who's going to kill you?" "Him," I pointed at the figure that had not moved. It was then I saw he wasn't alone. Coming out the shadows, surrounding us, were several big white wolves. "Dog," I yelled, looking for my pet. She walked out of the shadows towards the hooded figure and sat on her hind legs next to him. Cain pushed me behind him and took out his gun, pointed it at Monroe.
"Hey, partner, if you don't want to die, I suggest you keep moving."
The hooded figure lifted his head and looked at us from the shadows of his hood. His full white beard seemed to cover his whole face, all except his eyes that appeared ancient.
"Ah, look at that, Cain. It's just an old man,"
George said, before lifting his hand to gently touch the egg-sized knot on the back of his head. That testified to how petrified I was of Monroe. I was standing here, hiding behind men that I know wanted to kill me, but somehow, in my mind, they were not as much of a threat.
"Old man or not, I will blow your ass away," Cain said, aiming his gun at him.
Every fiber in my being protested what I was seeing. Someone pointing a gun at Monroe? My Monroe? "Stop!" I threw myself on his arm at the same time he fired. The bullet missed and Monroe never moved. Cain backhanded me, sending me flying to the ground, before he looked around for the first time and noticed that he was the only one with his weapon drawn.
"Shoot this mother!"
he screamed. A scream of horror froze in my throat as all 50 plus of Cain's men pulled their guns out and began to fire at Monroe. I saw a flash of white before the gun smoke got so thick I could see nothing else. Pain shot through my heart as I put my hand over my ear to drown out the deafening sound. There was a loud keening in my ear. And with everything that was going on, it took me a minute to realize that that keening noise was coming from me. I wept. No, I wailed as I looked towards the spot Monroe's body would have dropped after being riddled with bullets. My heart could not take that. I would surely die. Cain signaled for his men to stop shooting. As the gun smoke quickly dissipated, the only thing that could be heard was a collective heartbeat as everyone waited to see the damage that had been done.
"What the hell?"
Cain whispered. A laugh of glee, or just maybe good old-fashioned delirium, bubbled up from my throat when I saw that the spot Monroe's body should have been laying was empty. The men turned and looked around, the shock on their faces speaking volumes of the thoughts that were going on in their heads right now. "Why ain't he dead?" I heard someone say in the night. What happened next happened so fast that I wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Monroe stealthily descended headfirst from the trees directly above us like a dark angel. His coat fell open, making it appear as if he had two black wings stretching out on the side of him. He just seemed to be suspended there in midair. By the time Cain and his men's mind wrapped around what they were seeing, it was too late. Monroe reached underneath his arms and emerged with twin chrome fully automatic 9mm with pearl handles, and he began unloading with rapid fire bursts, piercing the stillness of the dawn. The two men closest to me bodies jerked violently before they fell to the ground, both with a single bullet to their head. "Shoot him!" Cain yelled, and it was as if whatever was holding Monroe up let him go. And as his body flipped to the ground, it moved in a way that it managed to dodge each bullet that came towards him. When his feet touched the ground, I blinked because he seemed to vanish. There was a vicious growl before one of Cain's men that stood close to the trees' gurgled scream filled the silence. One of the wolves had leapt on him and now had the man's throat in his mouth. The man closest to him aimed his gun at the wolf, and Monroe seemed to appear out of thin air. The blue steel of his sword flashed before the man's head flew off his body. I put my shaking hand to my mouth as I watched him dispatch 5 more men the same way. He moved so fast that it was hard for anyone to even take aim at him and get off a good shot. They were shooting each other in the process of trying.
Shoot that mother!
Spittle escaped from Cain's mouth as he yelled.
He's a ghost. How we supposed to shoot a ghost?
George screamed, but the last of his sentence came out a gurgle. I turned to see why, only to see blood gushing from between his fingers as he clutched his throat, his eyes wide in shock before his body dropped. Another man yelled as his body was violently yanked into the trees by another wolf who made quick work at disembowelling him. Realizing that they were dealing with something on the paranormal level and far past what they were used to, the few remaining men turned and ran, but they didn't make it far because the wolves took off after them, including Dog, and with their big claws and strong teeth they violently dismembered them. After watching the gory attack on his men, Cain turned to flee the other way but came to a screeching halt because standing directly in front of him, like his own shadow, was Monroe. Cain held his hands up as Monroe came from underneath his coat with one of his pistols.
Come on, buddy,
he began, but was silenced by the unrelenting sound of a single bullet. I stared wide-eyed as Cain's body fell in front of me, smoke escaping from the hole in his head. I craned my neck to look up at the tall man standing over me, but right then the sound of a sadistic laugh filled the air. Both of our heads turned to see a man standing off to the side of the trees watching us. Like Monroe, he wore a long coat, but he was shirtless. His well-muscled chest and stomach glistened in the early morning glow. There were strange, tribal-looking tattoos all over his chest and stomach.
You come out your hole to play with me?
He asked Monroe, who let out a rage-filled growl in his throat before he moved suddenly in the man's direction. The man let out another laugh before quickly turning to disappear in the trees. I blinked, because 1 minute I saw Monroe's back as he chased after him, and then it seemed as if he turned sharply to the right before disappearing in thin air. I got to my feet and I looked in the direction they had gone. Both men had disappeared. There was no trace of either of them or the wolves. Well, all except Dog, who sat on her hind legs next to me. There was blood on her snout and claws. As I reached down to pet her head, still looking in the direction that Monroe and the strange man had disappeared, Gina's scream pierced the air. "Let me go!" she yelled. I didn't think twice. I turned and sprinted back towards our camp. Dear Yah, what was happening? My nightmare had come to life. When I broke through the trees, what I saw shocked the hell out of me. Our camp was being raided by a group of uniformed men. But what was the shock above all shockers was they all wore tassels and fringes. We were getting rounded up by Hebrews. They were loading my people in the back of a caged truck like they were prisoners. "Tie!" Gina yelled. A well-muscled man was lifting her bucking body off her feet. "Hey, let her go!" I growled before I ran towards them, working out how I was going to break him down in my head. Praying like George, all those muscles were just for show and he didn't really have any real skill. I was so focused on studying the man's body, looking for a weak spot that I could go in on, that I didn't see the other soldier that came up behind me. Foolishly, he wrapped his arms around me, trying to lift me like the big man was doing Gina. I couldn't help the laugh that bubbled up from my lips before I elbowed him as hard as I could in his belly, followed by a back kick to his genitals. And as he clutched himself in pain, I turned in a jump, delivering a knee to his face that took him out. "Ty, help me!" Gina yelled. The man had her in his arms and he was now carrying her toward the truck. "Get us out of here!" Karen cried, looking at me through the bars. I ran towards them, but I was grabbed by 2 more men. I punched one in the throat, but the other man had taken that opportunity to slap a pair of handcuffs on my wrists. "Ah!" I screamed out in rage before I slammed my head back into his face. He yelled out, and the big man that had just put a screaming Gina in the back of the truck came towards us. I took several steps back, sizing him up. He was a fighter, but I can tell right off he was no killer. I had been raised around killers. My father was a killer. My brother, Gideon, Monroe, they were all killers. This man was not. However, judging by the way he moved on the balls of his feet, he was a damn good fighter. Damn. There was no way I could take him with my wrists in handcuffs. My gaze went back to my people, who all looked at me with desperate eyes. Dear Yah, give your servant the strength, I prayed as he came closer. I rotated my shoulders, trying to loosen my muscles. He charged me, and I went down into a sweep at the last minute, trying to take out his feet. He leaped up in the air, dodging my sweep. Swiftly, I came to my feet. Now that it was just me left to be loaded up, the other 30 or so uniformed warriors stood watching. "Why you got my people in that cage?" I yelled. He laughed, and it was then I noticed how handsome he was. He wore his hair cut low, his full beard neatly trimmed around his face.
"Because you're criminals, and you will stand before the elders to be judged for your crimes."
"What crimes?"
"We have witnesses. You've murdered 2 of our people and held 2 more prisoners for the last few weeks. And don't try to deny it. We found our supplies in your camp. You will be stoned for the lives you took."
"Stoned? Brother, you crazy as hell." He laughed again.
"Won't you just get in the truck peacefully?"
"Won't you uncuff my hands and give me a fair chance to protect myself?" I returned.
"We don't negotiate with criminals."
He came at me again. This time he tried to take my feet out in a sweep. I jumped up, dodging it while trying to deliver a kick to his face. He caught me in the air, and I began to use my bond fist to pound him. He held his head in a way that was causing me to punch the hard of his head. I tried to hit him in his neck and the side of his face, but could not with the handcuffs on. Someone else came behind me and unclipped my guitar from my back. I lost it then. I bucked, trying to break out the man's grip, but he was just too damn strong. I yelled in frustration, "Let me go!" He carried me over to the gated bed of the truck. The uniformed man that was standing there opened it, and the bastard threw me in, none too gently. I landed on the floor at my people's feet. They all looked down at me with shock on their faces. And for some reason, that just frustrated me extremely. I wanted to yell at them what the hell they were looking at.
"Who are these people?"
Heman asked. "They are not with Cain," Karen assured.
"Where are they taking us?" Keys asked. "Why are we being held prisoner?" Doughboy slid in.
"Hey!" I yelled up at them, losing my patience. They all blinked down at me. "I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're taking us. Like you, I've been disposed of." I held up my handcuffed hands to show them. "Now, if you'd be so kind to help me up, I will gladly try to figure this thing out."
"Oh, sorry about that,"
Heman said before he reached down and pulled me to sit on the bench next to him. With my bond hands, I moved my braids out of my face so that I could see. The sun had begun to brighten the sky. Our camp was being raided. They carried all our things to another truck, including my guitar. I looked around looking for him. Not the man I had just fought. The man that killed Cain and his crew. He was nowhere to be found. Just the uniformed warriors and their leader. I heard a soft whine coming from the side of the truck. I looked down and smiled. Dog was there, her face and neck covered in blood. I reached my hand out and she licked it. "Hey!" I yelled to the leader. He turned from his inspection of our supplies to look at me.
"What?" he answered.
"This is my dog. Can you let her in?" He looked down at my pet before glancing back up at me skeptically.
"You do know that's not a dog, right?"
I rolled my eyes at him. "Yes, I know it's not a dog, but she's still mine." He shook his head slightly before signaling for the man that still guarded the door to the truck to open it so the dog could jump in. She came and rested heavily at my feet. "What did he say to you?" Gina asked as she reached down and rubbed Dog's belly. "He said that we were going somewhere to be judged for our crimes." Cameron wrapped her arm around her daughters, pulling them closer to her. Tears came to her eyes. "What does that mean?" I patted her leg. "I think this may be the rescue party for those men Cain took captive. But look, they are wearing tassels." Gina's eyes flew back to them. "Oh wow, I hadn't noticed that." She turned back to look at me. "What does that mean?" I shook my head. In this day and time, it was no telling. In our journey, we had come across a lot of wicked-ass Hebrews. We just had to wait and see. "It means pray," I told them. "You never know, Yah may choose to have mercy on us." By the time the trucks that carried us began to move down the road, I was convinced that Monroe and the wolves had all been a part of my imagination. Somehow, I had manifested my dream into this reality. I read about it once when I was younger. Sometime when people go through traumatic situations, their mind could play tricks on them. It's a thing. Dog had been there for sure. She still had the blood on her to prove it. But there had not really been any other wolves. And there had definitely not been any Monroe. We traveled many hours, the last hour in heavily mountain terrain. There was a small road that led into a long tunnel that we turned into. It had been dug out of the base of the mountain. For a minute, I thought the tunnel would never end. When we finally came to stop in front of a gate that led out the other end of the tunnel, the sun had begun to set in the sky. Gina, who had been asleep with her head in my lap, sat up. "Where are we?" "I can smell the ocean," she said, stretching. She had a good nose. "No, we're all clean, but the truck exhaust that was thick in the small tunnel." "Yeah, we are by the ocean," Key said. "I saw it as we drove up. We are also very high into the mountains." Jazz and Karen's little girls came awake.
"I'm thirsty, Mommy."
Carmen, their youngest daughter, whined. "I know, baby. You'll have something to drink soon," she told her. But she looked at me over her head with worried eyes. Because the truth was, neither of us either knew if we would be alive when the sun next touched the sky. The leader of the crew, who had thrown me and Gina in the back of the truck, approached us with one of the guards at the gate, who held a pad in his hand. The leader began to call us off like we were cargo. 4 men, 2 children, and his gaze fell on Gina, who unconsciously scooted closer to me before she reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. Frowning, I looked down at her. She stared at the man with real fear in her eyes. I looked back at him and my frown grew, but he just grinned, shaking his head slightly. 3 women, he finished. "Do any of you have swords or tumors?" the guard asked. "No, we're all clean," Jazz told him. He nodded his head as he finished jotting something down on his ledger. The leader hit the side of the truck. "Roll out," he yelled. The truck lurched forward as we rolled through the gate.
"Look, Mommy, it's pretty."
Kenya, Jazz's oldest daughter, cried, looking around at the beautiful town. "Oh my God, we're in the twilight zone," Doe said, expressing all of our sentiments. It looked as if we had just ridden into Mayberry. There was no way this town could exist in this day and time. The streets were nice and neat. There were houses and stores. What the heck? This looked as if we were on a movie set. There were folks out walking their dogs. Scratch that. This place was more beautiful than anything I had ever seen on screen. As we rode slowly through the streets, people came out of their homes to stare at us. I noticed that all the people here wore either tassels or fringes. "Could this be a community of Hebrews?" Gina whispered. I nodded. "I think so." There were many races of people, but they all wore tassels. We drove a little while longer and came to a stop at a large gray building that said City Hall. A guard opened the gate for us. "Everybody out," he called. Carefully, we got out and followed him into the building. They led us all into a crowded courtroom. Sitting at a table that was slightly elevated were 7 older men. They all had full gray beards and dressed in Hebrew garb. They led us to stand on the floor in front of the dais. I turned and looked around at the crowd of people. Sitting up front was those 2 young men who had been taken captive in our camp. One of the men held a woman who wept loudly. A guard came through a side door carrying a shofar. He held it to his lips, and the sound that I hadn't heard since the lion's den filled the room, bringing everyone to silence.
Shalom, everyone. One of the elders on the dais began to speak. First, let me say how sorry we are for your loss, Akoti Dinia. May Yah be with you and your family in your time of grief.
A low mutter filled the room as everyone quietly gave them their condolences.
Standing before us today are those responsible for the murder of our brothers,
he began, but another man that had been standing over to the side of the elder's dais, who too was dressed in Hebrew garb, came over and spoke low in his ear. The elder nodded.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got it.
He turned back to look at us.
The young Akim testified before you came in that you all were not responsible for killing their father and uncle.
I exhaled in relief. Hallelujah.
However, the judge of our town says they found belongings of ours in your possession. And the Akim did testify that you are a group of thieves. What have you to say for yourself?
He looked at us over a pair of wiry glasses. Dope Boy, who was standing behind me, gave me a slight shove, pushing me out to speak up for the group. Angrily, I turned my head to look at him and was amazed to see that somehow my whole little group had bunched up behind me. Great. I guess I'm the spokesperson. I cleared my throat. Shalom, elders. That was something I hadn't said in a while. They nodded, but none of them said shalom back. Okay, this was a hostile environment, I see. I know it may have looked a certain way to the young Akim there. I intentionally used Hebrew words, hoping that if I showed them I was brought up in a Hebrew house, they would show mercy in their judgment. Goodness, I really felt like I was in a twilight zone. Who knew that I would be standing before a board of Hebrew elders in America? But the truth is, we too were held against our will.
Do you have 2 or more witnesses outside of yourselves that can testify to that?
Was that a trick question? I mean, it was just us standing here. Wow. Okay. I said at a loss. I turned to look at the 2 young men. I began, but the elder shook his head.
Said that you didn't kill their family. However, they testify that you are thieves.
He looked over a piece of paper that was in front of him.
Says here that you and your band here sing to people, luring them into a false sense of comfort, while your cohorts rob them blind. Is that true?
Well, I began, but the little rude old man cut me off.
It's a yes or no question, child.
I looked down at the ground, trying to get a hold of my temper. It was not a damn yes or no question.
Yes or no?
His raised voice caused Carmen and Kenya to step close to their father. I exhaled, angrily lifted my head. Yes! The courtroom erupted in noise.
Come to order,
the elder that sat at the end called. His deep voice boomed over the room, bringing it to quiet again.
So it is true. You're the Tranquil Band.
The who? I asked, completely confused.
The Tranquil Band. Word about your group reached us years ago. Did you know you were on the America's Most Wanted list?
My mouth dropped as I turned to look at my band members. We are? The elder nodded.
But we are not a part of the one world nation that is being rebuilt. We follow only one law here, and that's the law of the Most High. And since you are now in our possession, you will fall under that same law. Although, I am curious. It is said that your sound is out of this world. The word is, your voice can attract angels. Is that true?
I didn't say anything. I could already sense that they were getting ready to try and exploit us. We had already been exploited for the last few years. And here my people had thought they had found freedom. Show us, another one of the elders said. I didn't have to look behind me to know that my band members were not happy at their request. It seems as if we were going from one slavery to another. You could perform for us, or you can be stoned for your crimes. You choose, the elder with the glasses stated matter-of-factly. I turned to look at Heman, and the sadness was so real in his gentle soul. I felt like I had let them down. I touched his hand and turned slightly to the others, shaking my head, letting them know that I had this. It was my fault they were here. There is nothing so demeaning than being forced to perform when you didn't want to. I turned to look back at the dolls with determination. They wanted to see what my voice can do. So be it. I'll show them what I can do. For just a moment, I closed my eyes, and I let the sadness I now felt fill me until it was nothing else for me to do but sing.
Where you wanna fly, blackbird? You ain't never gonna fly.
My voice filled the room, stopping everyone in their tracks. They would not only see what my voice could do, they would feel it. I embraced my sadness, all of it.
Where you wanna fly, blackbird? You ain't never gonna fly.
Tears came to my eyes when I thought about the condition of men today, when I thought about how wicked they had become. And then I thought about the day Monroe and Dawid went away, and my heart began to weep.
No place big enough for holding all the tears you're gonna cry.
I continued to bat out, drawing all my pain up inside of me, letting it come through my voice. This was my mama's favorite song.
'Cause your mama's name was lonely, and your daddy's name was pain.
The haunting sound of the harmonica joined my voice as Heman gently began to play next to me. I closed my eyes and I began to sway my head as my body began to feel warm all over.
And they called you Little Sorrow, 'cause you'll never love again.
The saxophone ripped through the air and it sang alongside of me.
You ain't got no one to hold you. You ain't got no one to care.
Doe began to use his hands to beat a hypnotic beat on the table.
If you'd only understand it, nobody wants you anywhere.
I thought about my mama's pain after Dawid left. I thought about Ginaya and I walking away from the lion's den for the last time. I thought about all the nights I grieved for Monroe, for my brother, for my mama and daddy. I thought about all the nights I lay awake watching over my little sister in fear that one of those blood fiends would get to her. I thought about the pain of losing her. She was all I had left. I thought about the years of being enslaved, forced to sing like now. I began to move my fingers, longing for my songbird that had been ripped from me. The song warped, becoming something that lived only in my head, no longer belonging to Nina Simone. And like they always did, my band came with me. It was as if they were in my head, as if they saw the notes come to life at the same time I did. I was lost. I was so deep in my sorrow that it took my sister gripping my arm to bring me out. Ty, she cried. Ty, that's enough. That's enough. I had been moaning to the sax, and I abruptly came to a stop. When I slowly opened my eyes, I looked at her standing in front of me with tears in hers. I pulled her close, hugging her. I didn't mean to do that to her, only to them. I looked up at the Dawes, and the elders were all drying their eyes with napkins. The widow was crying louder, as well as her sons. I looked around and was pleased to see that there wasn't a dry eye in the building.
What is going on here?
The big man who had thrown me in the back of the truck voice boomed across the room as he came into the side door. He looked around the room as if everyone had gone mad.
A miracle, Ben.
The elder with the glasses called as he removed his glasses to wipe his eyes.
We have been gifted from the Most High. Are you sure? 'Cause it looks as if everyone is grieving.
He came to a stop next to the elder, and once again his gaze fell on Gina. I pulled her to stand behind me. I didn't like the way he looked at her.
All right. Come to order, the elder called. We have reached our judgment. Because you let our young Akim go, your lives will be spared. But for your crimes of thievery, you will have to answer for. Because you took away from my people, you will give back to them. Ema Jacqueline has started a choir. You will go and sign up for it.
Oh, yikes, no, I shook my head. Elder, we don't really have a choir sound, you know what I mean? He looked at me over his glasses.
What did I say to give you the impression that you had a choice?
Oh my goodness, he was so rude. The only reason I didn't give him a piece of my mind was because my parents raised me to always respect my elders. But this fella here had a lot to learn about respect himself.
Now, because we can't trust you to live on your own, you will be assigned a master to look over you. You will report to your master, and when you are not singing and practicing for the choir, your duty is to serve your new master.
Wait a minute, I began, but the little man looked at me over his glasses.
Again, this is not up for debate.
Now, he looked out into the crowd.
Who can use a spare hand?
He asked. The widow stood. She was a pretty older woman, maybe in her late 40s, early 50s. My boys are not quite old enough to fill their father's shoes. I could use a spare hand now that my husband... She never finished her sentence before she started to weep again. Her sons pulled her down to sit as they wrapped their arms around her.
Of course, Dinaya. Of course.
The elder turned back to look at our group.
You, he pointed to Base, step forward.
Base stepped forward.
What is your name?
I opened my mouth to tell him that he didn't talk, but surprisingly, he opened his mouth and did just that.
Leon, sir.
His voice sounded scratchy from unuse. I turned to look at Gina, surprised.
And how old are you, Leon? 49, sir.
Elder nodded his head as he looked Leon up and down, as if he was trying to decide if the widow would be safe with him. I took in Base. I never noticed before that he wasn't a bad-looking man. In fact, he was quite handsome in his own way.
All right, Leon. You will go home with the Kotidiniya and serve her. You be careful. If anything happens to her and her family, you will pay with your life. Do you understand?
Base nodded his head.
I do.
He turned to us, and I smiled up at him. Are you going to be okay? I whispered. He nodded.
I think so.
I clutched his hand, feeling like I was losing one of my children, which was crazy because we had just found out that Base was 19 years my senior. Okay, look, just hang in there. I'm going to figure something out. We won't be enslaved too much longer. I'm gonna get us out of here, okay? I spoke so only my small group could hear me. Bass nodded. Okay. We all watched as he followed the widow and her son out the courtroom. Another Ima stood. She was a lot older. I guess maybe in her 80s. It's been a while since I heard the voice of children playing in the yard. I do miss that. And it's just me and Paul's in that great big old house. I can take the family. There's plenty of room. The elder nodded.
You two, step forward,
He said, indicating Karen and Jazz. They stepped forward, their little girls clinging to their legs.
State your name for the court. My name is Richard, but everyone called me Jazz. And this is my wife Karen and our two little girls, Carmen and Kenya. And it looks as if you guys are expecting soon.
Jazz nodded.
Yes, sir, in another 3 months. Ima Leah is nearly 90 years old. She is stubborn and she refuses help most of the time. But I expect you to lend a hand anyway, if you know what I mean.
He gave them a stern look over his glasses.
Yes, sir, we know what you mean,
Jazz assured him. They turned back to us, and once again we huddled together. Are you guys going to be all right? I asked. Karen touched my shoulder, smiling. We'll be fine. Just don't forget about us. We're your family. If you leave, you have to promise to take us with you. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. You don't ever have to doubt that. We are one unit. She nodded her head before hugging both Gina and I. Then she hugged Doe, Heman, and Keys. I'll see y'all later, I told Cameron and Kenya, hugging them. Then we watched as they left the courtroom with Ima Leah.
You 3 young men are of training age. You will join the army and begin your training tomorrow.
He eyed Doughboy.
Looks as if this hadn't come a moment too soon.
My mouth dropped open. That rude little fart just called Doughboy fat.
The army?
Key said, looking at me with a stricken look on his face. It will be all right. Just remember, it's not for long, I whispered to him.
Yeah, but I'm not a fighter.
I wanted to say no shh, but I kept that to myself. I really didn't feel bad for them. Having them depend solely on me to keep them safe for the last few years had been a bit draining. Had my father been around, he would have been started them on a regiment. You guys can do this, I assured them. Heman stepped in front of me.
Maybe then you can see yourself being with me.
I frowned at him. Heman, he always says stuff like this to me. What do you mean? I asked.
If I learn how to be a soldier, then you will love me.
I smiled at him then. Oh, man, I love you already. Just not like that. But you should learn how to be a soldier anyway. He nodded, looking sad.
You're not leaving us, right? You won't go without us,
Doe asked. I shook my head. No, big baby. I ain't going nowhere without my dough. He laughed. That was an inside joke between he and I. 2 guards came and got them, telling them to come with them. Till finally, just Gina and I stood in front of the panel.
Now, as for the fate of you 2,
the elder began, but the tall, handsome man standing next to him interrupted.
I can use a hand at my place.
All the elders turned to look at him surprised.
Judge,
the elder on the end called.
You're not suggesting taking them home with you?
Oh, so he was the judge here. No wonder.
Well, not both of them. Her,
he pointed to Gina, who began shaking her head frantically. She squeezed my hand tight, laying her head on my shoulder. No, she cried.
Young lady, elder yelled at her. You don't speak when a judge is speaking.
He looked back at the big man.
Go on, Judge. Well, you know it's just me and Jacob at the house. He's still so young, and with his mother passing away, I think he can use a female presence around the house. I mean, we both could.
Gina squeezed my hand tighter. Ty, do something, she whispered in my ear. You can't let him take me away. I patted her hand, trying to calm her As my mind raced, I couldn't let him take her away. He had been watching her inappropriately since we left the camp. "Excuse me, Elder, may I speak?" I asked. He turned his nose up at me.
"No, you may not. You," he pointed to Gina, "step forward."
Gina shook her head as tears began to come out of her eyes. How many times she had gotten angry with me for treating her like a baby. Funny, she didn't look like the 25-year-old she had bragged of being to me so many times. She looked like a young girl, standing balled up under me, clinging to my hand like it was her lifeline. She couldn't help it though. Dawid always accused Mom and Daddy of spoiling me, but poor Griot, being the baby, was spoiled by us all.
"Come on, child. We don't have all day. Step forward on your own, or I will have somebody help you."
I lifted my arm, pulling Gina from under me, then gently pushed her forward, although she still clutched my hand with both of hers in back of her.
"What is your name and age?"
the elder asked. I smiled because his voice had gotten gentle for Gina, but that's the effect she had on people. Mama said she looked just like her mother, Lovely, and was fragile like her too. She was all softness and gentleness. My name is Griot, and I'm 25. I saw a look of relief wash over the judge's face. That only testified to his lecherous intentions.
"All right, dear. The judge here is a hard worker. He works around the clock to keep this town functional. He has a small son that is about 5.
He looked up at the judge.
6,
The handsome man corrected. Elder nodded.
6. And sadly his wife passed away from the flu epidemic that broke out a few years ago. You will go with the judge and do what he tells you. To disobey him is punishable by death. Do you understand me?"
Gina looked back at me, and there were tears in her big, beautiful eyes. I nodded slightly. She turned and nodded. "Yes, sir." Her gentle voice filled the room. The judge exhaled. The snake. Gina turned around and threw herself in my arms. "Ty, what am I gonna do?" she cried in my neck. "Shh, sweetheart. Shh. You're gonna be strong. Think about the others and how brave they were." Her tears wet up my neck. The judge came down and gently grabbed her hand. When Gina looked and seen that it was him, she clung to me tighter. "I can't do it, Ty. I can't do it." She was freaking out. "Dear, y'all help me. I didn't know what to do." The judge scooped her up in his arms, forcing her to let me go. She reached for me and I tried to pull her away from him. I didn't know what else to do.
"Come to order,"
the elder called, because once again the courtroom erupted in chaos. The judge began to carry her out and she looked back at me, reaching for me. "Ty," she called. Tears came to my eyes. I never felt so helpless in my life.
"Now you,"
the elder said, pointing his finger at me as if I was the troublemaker here. Right then, the side door opened and a warrior walked in. Unlike the judge, this man was a killer. He was not dressed in a uniform, but I knew he was a warrior by his lean build and the sword he carried on his back. He leaned over and said something in the elder's ear, and whatever he said caused the elder to draw back away from him, stunned. But the warrior just simply stood and faced forward. The elder turned and whispered something to the other elders, and they too seemed astonished at what he told them. They whispered back and forward to each other for a while, and I could hear bits and pieces of what they said, and I can tell you, it was not reassuring. "We can't send this woman up there alone. He's barely even civilized," one of them said. "Well, what will you have us do? He keeps us safe. If he wants this woman, we give him this woman," the elder with the glasses hissed. "I'll never hear the end of it from my wife if I send that girl up that mountain," another elder spat. "Listen, brother, if you don't have no order in your house, that's on you. But I'm sending her up that mountain because without him, we will all be dead, and you know it. He's the reason your precious wife can sit comfortably in her home and complain," the rude elder came back with. "Ain't nobody said I don't have control in my house," the other elder fired back. "Well, you the one that brought up your wife and what she ain't gonna be happy about," nasty elder sent back to him. "Listen, we need to make a decision. Yes or no, another elder cut in. Yes, rude elder said. No, the elder with the complaining wife said. Yes, another said. Yes, another replied. My eyes fell to the last elder. He turned to look at me and there was sorrow in his face. A look of pity in his eyes made me want to act out like Griot. I'm sorry, he whispered to me before he sat back in his chair. Yes, he said louder. The elder with the glasses gave the elder with the complaining wife a smug look before his gaze fell on me. Step forward, he told me. I looked around. There was nobody standing next to me, so technically I was already forward. But I didn't rock forward. Their response to whatever it was the fierce warrior had whispered in their ear had me a little worried. I took an unnecessary step forward. State your name and age for the court. I cleared my throat. My name is Anataya and I'm 30 years old. He nodded. The man on the mountain has requested you for his household. The court erupted in chaos. I frowned looking around me. What the hell? Who was the man on the mountain? And why was these people acting as if he was some kind of monster? Order in the court, the elder called. But that didn't bring order. The people still talked amongst themselves about what he just said. The elder with the deep voice stood. Order in the court. His voice boomed throughout the room, breaking all quiet in its wake. You will go with JD here, and he will take you to your new master. The court erupted in chaos once again. I suggest you don't remove those handcuffs till you get her there. It says here she's violent, the elder told JD, from what he had read on the paper. JD chuckled as he walked off the dais. Yeah, will do, he said, but he didn't look worried. As soon as we walked out of the courthouse, Dog, who had been laying the court steps, fell into step next to me. Followed JD Jeep. So, you're Anataya, he asked as he took off my handcuffs, tossing them in the back of the Jeep. Yeah, you know me? He chuckled, shaking his head. Nah, but I have seen your name before. Hop in. I grabbed a hold of the bar at the top of the Jeep and hopped in. Dog leaped in the back. JD hopped in the driver's side, same way I did. I couldn't tell what JD's race was. He pushed a tape in the tape deck and reggaeton began to blast from the speakers. Puerto Rican, maybe? We rode quite a ways, going further up the mountain. The roads got really thin. I clutched the armrest for dear life because JD didn't get the memo that maybe he should slow down around sharp curves on the mountain. The houses began to be far apart, and it was then I saw the huge villa-like house high up on the mountain. It was surrounded by trees. JD brought the car to a stop in front of the beautiful home. Go right through those doors. He should be waiting for you. I stepped out the car and Dog jumped out behind me. Who? I asked. JD smiled. The boss. And then he put his Jeep in reverse and backed up, turning around to head back down the mountain. I walked to the rail that looked out over the edge of the mountain and was amazed at the view. The moon was big and bright in the sky, and it looked over the little town that seemed not to be affected by the plagues that was sweeping over the rest of the earth, tucked safely in this valley. At the back of the house was the perfect view of the Atlantic Ocean. I turned to face the house, looking up at it. It was huge, definitely a mansion. The 3-story building was designed like an authentic Mexican villa. I looked down at Dog. I guess it's time for me to be brave, huh? She whined in her throat. Then she brought her big head, butting my hand with it, as if to tell me she was here with me. I rubbed her head. Thanks, girl. I inhaled, taking a deep breath, and walked on through the door. The house was dark on the inside. A cool breeze from the ocean swept through the open windows. Carefully, I walked in, looking around. The place was big, but there was no furniture. On each of the big arch windows was a pair of soft curtains that blew in the wind. Something moved on the steps that faced the front door, getting my attention. Oh my goodness. My hand flew to my mouth. Sitting on the steps was a big white wolf, cleaning blood from his paws. For a moment, I was at a loss for what to do. I was not ready to face my past, to face my sins. I didn't want to face the man that I had hurt so bad it kept me up at night for years afterward. I looked back towards the door. I could run, but where would I run to? As if it could hear my thoughts, another big white wolf came from the side room and sprawled out across the front door, cutting off that option. Dog butted at my leg with her head, as if to tell me, stop being a coward and get moving. My father would be ashamed of me. I squared my shoulders and I began to walk slowly further into the house. There was a soft glow coming from a big room off to the side. My heart beat so loud I wondered if Dog could hear it. I put my hands to my chest because I think I was going to have a heart attack. The air became too thick. Or maybe it was my fear, but suddenly I was having a hard time breathing. 2 white wolves walked from the back from what looked like the kitchen, eyeing me. When I reached the big archway that led to what looked like a living room, my steps came to a stop. Standing in front of the fireplace, looking down into its flames through a pair of shades, was a man that I knew so well, yet was a stranger. He had taken off his coat and stood in a pair of cargo pants and a tank top that molded his lean, muscled torso enough to reveal just how much his body had changed. He was bigger, more muscled. His tan arms were so defined in muscle it looked as if it had been sculpted. Tucked underneath those massive arms, in a shoulder holster, was those 2 chrome guns with the pearl handles. His body contrasts starkly with his white hair that covered his head in a wild tangled mess. He looked like a madman. He wore his hair long and untamed. It was literally all over his head. His full white beard covered so much of his face that only his eyes showed, rather his sunglasses. The only thing that kept him from looking like a deranged, old, crazed man was the fact that his body was young and lean and sculpted with muscle. There were 2 more massive wolves in here with him. One rested at his feet, the other over by the window where it perched up on the ledge watching me. There was a single chair that dipped deep with high armrests in the center of the floor. It was then I saw my songbird. It rested on the other side of the fireplace. Slowly I walked towards it, needing to feel it in my hands like I needed to breathe. Without taking my eyes away from Monroe, I leaned down and I picked it up. I didn't exhale until it was strapped safely on my back. He looked up from the fire then and glanced over at me. He wore a pair of those mirror shades, so it was my own frightened face that stared back at me. He brought up his hands and took off the glasses, and for the second time in minutes my hand flew to my mouth to stifle a scream. That had not been a dream. His irises and his pupils were completely white.
You know, when I saw you earlier,
He began to speak, causing me to jump. His voice was so deep, deeper than I remembered.
you looked at me as if you saw a ghost. Tell me, why is that, wife?